"Get your dirty hands off that car, boy." The words struck me like a whip. He didn't see my suit or my title. He only saw my skin. This was the moment my life's work became brutally personal. It's a strange thing, the moments before your world implodes. They're almost always overwhelmingly normal. 6 hours before I was slammed against the hood of my own car, my morning began as it always did. The 5:30 a.m. alarm buzzed in the quiet of my suburban Virginia home. As I moved through the hallway, the faces of my family smiled back at me from their frames. My brilliant wife, Anna, our fiercely intelligent daughter, Sarah, and a younger version of me, shaking hands with 3 different FBI directors over the years. The news was playing on the kitchen television as I prepare my coffee. A reporter was discussing police reform initiatives. Anonymous federal officials continue pushing for nationwide body camera requirements. I adjusted my tie, listening with an intimacy the reporter couldn't possibly fathom. The words on the screen were mine. The policies were mine. I would later learn that as I was reviewing these statistics, Officer Mike Miller was across town in his precinct locker room, grumbling to his partner about Washington desk jockeys who had never done real police work. At FBI headquarters, my corner office was a testament to a career spent inside the system. Awards and commendations lined the walls, but the nameplate on my desk was strategically angled away from the door. Anonymity was a necessary shield. My secretary knocked. "Director, your 6 p.m. community engagement is confirmed. The venue is on K Street." I nodded, closing a file labeled Metropolitan Police Reform Initiative Phase 2. Inside were the cold, hard numbers that haunted my days and fueled my work. Arrest disparities, complaint patterns, evidence of the very systemic misconduct I was fighting to dismantle. The data painted a grim picture, but a number on a page feels nothing like the cold steel of a car hood against your cheek. A text from Anna buzzed on my phone. "Don't work too late. Sarah has her recital tomorrow." Leaving at 5:30, I typed back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The community meeting was part of a listening tour I had quietly organized. I was scheduled to speak, identified only as a senior federal official. The irony was thick enough to taste. For months, I've been the architect of policies designed to address precisely the kind of prejudice I had faced my entire life. Now, I was heading out to discuss building trust between law enforcement and the community, all while knowing that for men who look like me, that trust is a fragile, often non-existent commodity. I left headquarters precisely at 5:30, choosing to drive my personal vehicle, a discreet dark gray Audi A8, to avoid drawing attention. The drive to K Street was calm. The storm was waiting. K Street was exactly as I expected, a canyon of glass and steel, filled with professionals whose expensive suits were a kind of urban camouflage. I found a spot outside the community center, checked my watch, 15 minutes early, as always, and stepped out of my car. That's when I saw it. A patrol car slowing to a crawl across the street. And I saw him. Officer Miller's eyes locked onto me. It wasn't the look of an officer assessing a threat. It was the look of a predator spotting something he believed was out of his territory. In his world, a 30-year-old black man in a tailored suit, stepping out of a luxury sedan on this street, was an anomaly that had to be corrected. Before I could even close my door, he was out of his car, his voice a snarling command that cut through the evening air. "Get your dirty hands off that car, boy." I turned slowly, my expression controlled, but my senses on high alert. I'd been through this before in different cities, in different uniforms, but the script was always the same. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snarled, closing the distance in 3 aggressive strides. He shoved me hard against the Audi. The cold shock of the metal jolted through the fine wool of my suit jacket. The impact echoed off the nearby buildings, and I heard the collective gasp of pedestrians. Their evening stroll had just become a spectacle. "Hand on the vehicle." "Now." I complied, placing my palms flat on the car's roof. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is my vehicle." He laughed, a mocking, ugly sound. He began a pat-down that was less about procedure and more about performance. "Your vehicle, right? Let me guess. You're a doctor, a lawyer, maybe a senator." His voice dripped with a sarcasm so thick it was poisonous. pitched loud enough for the growing crowd to hear every word. "I work for the federal government," I replied, my voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline, despite the humiliation. "Federal government?" He howled with laughter, yanking my wallet from my jacket. "Were you?" "A janitor at the post office." "Don't try to impress me with your fancy words, boy." By now, a dozen people had their phones out. I saw the small red lights of recording icons and felt a complex mixture of relief and dread. Evidence was being created, but my dignity was being publicly dismantled in real time. I made a conscious choice. I would be calm. I would be articulate. The cameras would record his prejudice, but they would also record my composure. This was no longer just about me. It was about the record. This was for every person who didn't have a title to fall back on. The wail of a second siren announced the arrival of backup. A younger officer, whose name tag read Chun, approached cautiously. His eyes darted from my custom-tailored suit to the Omega watch on my wrist, my father's watch, and then to Miller's escalating rage. I could see the conflict in his face, a battle between protocol and partnership. "What's the situation, Mike?" Chin asked quietly. "Caught this one trying to steal this Mercedes," Miller announced proudly, loud enough for his audience. "Probably got the keys from some rich lady's purse." Chin frowned. His gaze met mine for a fraction of a second, and I saw a flicker of profound doubt. I wasn't behaving like a car thief. I addressed him directly, my voice firm. "Officer, I'm requesting your supervisor respond to this scene. This situation is escalating unnecessarily." "Shut up," Miller barked, grabbing my arm and twisting it behind my back with a painful jerk. He turned his attention back to my car, yanking open the passenger door, and began tossing papers onto the street with theatrical carelessness. My briefcase tumbled out, falling open and scattering its contents across the pavement. And that's when everything shifted. Chin's eyes widened. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the scattered documents. Even from where I stood, I knew what he was seeing: official letterhead, classification stamps, federal seals, and the words FBI Director in bold print. "Mike," Chin whispered urgently, tugging at his partner's sleeve. "Maybe we should slow down." "Slow down?" Miller interrupted, not looking up. "Let him go because he's wearing a nice suit? That's the problem with cops today. No backbone." He continued his search, his movements becoming more frantic. And then I saw it. He used his body to shield his actions from most of the crowd, but from my position, pressed against the car, my view is clear. It was a flick of the wrist. A quick, unnatural movement as he palmed a small plastic baggie from his utility belt and slipped it under the driver's seat. My blood ran cold. I didn't need to be a forensics expert to know, with absolute, soul-crushing certainty, what he had just done. Well, he announced triumphantly, pulling out the baggie and holding it up for everyone to see, a cheap magician performing his grand illusion. "What do we have here?" "Cocaine." I turned to face him, the rage inside me a white-hot, controlled inferno. My voice was low, but it cut through the noise of the street. "Officer, that substance is not mine, and you know precisely where it came from." The metallic click of the handcuffs closing around my wrists echoed louder than any shout. In that sound, I wasn't the director of the FBI. I was just another of the grim statistics I read about every morning. Miller shoved me into the back of his patrol car with a mock politeness that was more insulting than any slur. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the crowd through the grimy window, a sea of faces and phone screens. I was no longer a person to them. I was content. Inside my head, however, the gears were turning with military precision. My first emergency call to Deputy Director Carter would have gone unanswered. Protocol dictates that after a second missed call, a location trace is initiated. Emergency protocols were already in motion. The clock was ticking, not for me, but for Officer Mike Miller. The precinct smelled of cheap disinfectant, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. As Miller paraded me through the booking area, I became an object of curiosity. I provided my information in calm, measured tones. When the desk sergeant asked for my occupation, I stated simply federal law enforcement. Miller scoffed loudly. Probably a security guard at the Social Security office. I was granted my one phone call. I was led to a metal phone bolted to the wall, My handcuffs temporarily removed. The room was busy, but a strange quiet seemed to fall as I picked up the receiver. I dialed the 11 digits I knew better than my own name. The line connected on the first ring. "This is Director Hayes," I said, my voice low but carrying the full weight of my authority. "I am currently in custody at the 5th Precinct. Implement Protocol 7. Immediately." I hung up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the desk sergeant, a veteran cop with weary eyes, physically flinch. His face went white. He knew what Protocol 7 was. It was the oh shit button for the entire federal government, reserved for an emergency involving the highest ranks of law enforcement. Miller snatched the phone away. "Time's up, hotshot. Back to your cell." As I was led to a holding cell, I felt the atmosphere in the precinct shift. The air grew thick with unspoken panic. The system, in its blind, blundering way, had swallowed me whole. But another, more powerful system was now roaring to life, and it was coming to tear this place apart to get me back. The holding cell was cold, the metal bench unforgiving. Another detainee looked me over. "What are you in for?" he asked. "A misunderstanding," I replied quietly. "That's about to become very expensive for some people." I didn't have to wait long. The usual chaotic murmur of the precinct died down, replaced by a tense silence, punctuated by the sound of heavy, purposeful footsteps. Not the shuffling of cops, but the synchronized tread of agents. My people had arrived. The cell door clanged open. A shaken-looking sergeant unlocked my handcuffs. "The commander wants to see you," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. I was escorted down the hall to the office of the watch commander, a man named Peterson. I walked in, and the scene was like something out of a movie. My deputy director, Sarah Carter, stood there, her face a mask of controlled fury. Flanking her were two of my most senior agents, their expressions deadly serious. And in the corner, looking small and confused, were Officer Miller and Officer Chin. The blood drained from Miller's face, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed mask of pure terror. The power dynamic of a universe had just audibly snapped back into its correct alignment. "Officer Miller," Peterson's voice cracked. "Do you want to tell me exactly who you arrested tonight?" "Some car thief," Miller stammered, his earlier bravado completely gone. "Claimed to work for the federal government." Sarah Carter stepped forward, her FBI badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Officer Miller, let me introduce myself. I'm Deputy Director Sarah Carter. The man you arrested tonight, the man you humiliated, the man you planted drugs on, is my boss." She let the words hang in the air. "FBI Director Jonathan Hayes." A strangled noise escaped Miller's throat. "That's impossible. We've reviewed everything." One of my agents cut in, holding up a tablet, displaying crystal-clear body cam footage. "Your camera, Chin's camera, and 12 civilian videos. We watched you palm the baggie." Miller's legs buckled. I didn't know." I finally spoke, my voice devoid of heat, as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "That's the entire problem, officer. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You saw a black man in a nice car, and your prejudice did the rest." I took a step toward him, and he flinched. "You didn't just arrest an innocent man tonight. You arrested a mirror, and in it, you revealed everything that is broken about the system you swore an oath to protect." In the hours and days that followed, my team dismantled Officer Miller's career with surgical precision. The investigation revealed what I already suspected. My case wasn't an anomaly. It was his business model. We uncovered a pattern of systematic abuse targeting black men, with at least 47 cases bearing an identical signature of fabricated evidence. Each file was a ghost of what could have been my own fate had I been anyone else. 6 months later, I sat in the front row of a federal courtroom. Miller, a broken man in a defendant's suit, pleaded guilty to 15 federal felonies. I wasn't alone. Seated around me were dozens of his other victims, doctors, professors, lawyers, mechanics, men whose lives he had tried to destroy. We were a silent chorus of vindication. When a judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison, a quiet, profound sense of completion settled over the room. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. My ordeal became the catalyst. The Hayes Commission on Police Reform was established, and the reforms we had been drafting for years were passed into law with overwhelming support. The incident wasn't swept under the rug. It became a national case study in bias, a painful but necessary spark for change. 1 year later, I returned to that same spot on K Street. A small memorial plaque now marked the location, dedicated to all victims of police misconduct. I was there to speak at the first annual Police Accountability Summit, held in the very community center I never reached that night. Captain Chun, formerly Officer Chun, now promoted and heading the training division, greeted me at the door. We spoke of progress, of the mandatory bias training, and the 98% body cam compliance rate. Inside, I saw the faces of Miller's other victims. They weren't victims anymore. They were advocates, leaders of a movement we had started together on that sidewalk. That night didn't break me. It forged me. I was no longer just the FBI director fighting a systemic problem from the top down. I had become one of the citizens I had sworn to protect, feeling the system's crushing weight from the bottom up. The experience didn't just inform my policy, it set it on fire. Have you ever been misjudged because of prejudice? Have you witnessed an injustice and stayed silent, assuming someone else would act? Share your experience in the comments below, and please, always comment with respect. If this story moved you to think differently about what it means to stand up for what's right, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. Because real change doesn't just come from laws and commissions. It starts when we refuse to be silent witnesses. It starts with us.